So here's my Detroit recap, 2024 Detroit recap, right? So, I mean, a lot of stuff happened in Detroit, guys. I mean, we had Triumph bikes out there. Hayden Deegan looks a little frustrated. We had Jeremy Martin with a really rough crash. Had Austin Forkner with a win. There's all kinds of things that happened in the Detroit 250 East debut, and some great things too. So, really, I'm going to talk about some of the standout things to me, which honestly was the main event crash was probably one of the biggest things. You saw Seth Hammaker kind of get tangled up with one guy, lean over into Tom Vial, and then boom, there goes the entire half of that 250 East field. It captured Hayden Deegan. It captured Evan Ferry. It got Nick Romano. It got a lot of guys that we thought were going to be, running well up front. Hayden being one of the biggest people. And of course, we saw Hayden come around the lap a couple times, and it looked like he was throwing the middle finger up to maybe the Kawasaki guys, maybe Tom Vial, I don't know, but it was a huge mess, and you could tell he was frustrated because he was going around the track and he was trying to do the rhythm sections, but his bars were bent, so he really couldn't even go through the rhythm sections as smooth as he wanted to. So you could see the frustration in Hayden. I think it was a big deal for him because he was going to come out and put in work and show something on that East Coast. With Seth Hammaker, which is crazy because I feel like they were talking about he'd been injured in free practice and that he wasn't even going to race that night in Detroit, But there he was in qualifying, which he didn't look bad in qualifying. Seth Hammaker was riding pretty smooth in qualifying. And there he lined up for the main event. So in my mind, I'm like, yo, I didn't even think Seth was going to be there. And then Seth is there. And Seth's part of why we see this race incident happen. I'm not blaming it on Seth Hammaker. Racing incidents like this happen. You know what I'm saying? It was just the way that turn was. Everybody was going to be rushing on the inside. He got off balance, overcorrected, whatever the case may be, tapped into Tom Vial, and swoosh, there it was. But, I mean, let's not take away from Austin Forkner grabbing a win on his debut. Not debut, but the debut to the East Coast, right? So, and Forkner had a really smooth race. It was really good to see Chance Hymas up there, too. We didn't even hear a lot about Chance Hymas, in the offseason. But in his heat race, he looked good. In his main event, he looked solid still. He fell back a lot. I think he had a crash that kind of took him from, his top 3 position that he was holding on to. But, huge shout out to Daxton Bennick, bro, because that kid came out there. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. He was going to put the laps in. He snuck up to 3rd place, as he said in his interview. He has the speed. He looked clean, in my opinion. So Daxton Bennick, another person to look great. And I know some of you guys are, thinking about the other big crash that happened in the 250 heats, right? So we've seen Jeremy Martin kind of get toppled over in the whoops. And, the crash itself wouldn't have been so bad, but when he went into the air, his body rotated backwards and he hit the face of another jump, right? And it just back of his head slapped the face of that jump, and he was concussed. And I think that's the official is that he has a tough concussion. The good news was he was waving to the crowd as he was going off the track. So it was some pretty gnarly crashes that we saw in the 250 East debut, but we don't want to take away from any of the riders that did super duper well, right? Because Austin Forkner, Daxton Bennick, Chance Hymas, Max Anstey was looking really comfortable and smooth in the main event as well. So we want to make sure we give it up to Max Anstey, who's a cool, humble guy and rode his race, and it looked great. The other thing I really wanted to call out was the Triumph bikes, all right? So we actually got to see Evan Ferry and Jalek Swoll on those Triumph bikes, which, amazingly, both of them made it into the main event. I know Evan Ferry had to go to the LCQs to kind of, get his final spot, but he he murdered those LCQs, man. He did super well in the last chance qualifiers, which was good to see. Evan Ferry, another person that we know was slated to come out, and he got that ride with the Triumph bikes. I wanted to see more from him. Unfortunately, that starting crash in the 250 race main event was detrimental to him. He kind of flung into the wall. I don't even think he got back on the bike. I think he ended up not finishing. But it was a good 250 main event. It was a good day overall in Detroit, in my honest opinion. We had some really good racing in the 250 class. Now, you know what? That little battle that we got to see between Jason Anderson and Jett Lawrence, in my opinion, was actually pretty nice. Now, of course, once Jett got clear of Anderson, Jett did exactly what Jett's going to do. And I know a lot of you guys are out here like, yo, Jett, I don't like Jett. We don't want to see Jett win. Jett's skilled, bruh. He did his thing. It was actually clean to watch. And he didn't have like the smoothest race either. There was a couple times where he made some mistakes where he kind of over jumped or he kind of cross jumped, got a little mixed up on himself, but he still finished the race out well. You know, Chase Sexton, a really smooth ride from Chase. We didn't even hear a lot about Chase because Chase was just running his race at the right pace, in my opinion, which I want to say because Chase did a smooth race, he's again the points leader. That's something like that, I'm pretty sure. I don't know, guys. I was watching Tomac, and Tomac got me concerned, bro, because at the start of the race, he was doing well, but as the race progressed, Tomac just kind of, I don't know where he was going. He kind of fell off for me. He really did. I know a lot of people like maybe he had clutch issues, maybe he had a flat tire or something was wrong. He didn't feel comfortable on the bike. My fear was that maybe he re-aggravated his injury, right? So maybe something like that happened. I haven't got any like exact information on that, so don't quote me on any of this at all. But I could tell his riding style was completely different. He wasn't battling and he was falling backwards. And as he was falling backwards, you didn't see him go on the defense, right? So he kind of knew that he couldn't keep the pace. So something was amiss there, and I hope to find out exactly what was going on with Eli Tomac in that 450 main event. Anderson, another guy. Like, Anderson looked fast in qualifying. He looked fast at the start of the race, right? And then out of nowhere, Anderson just looked like he couldn't wake up and didn't wake up until about 6 minutes left in that 450 main event. So I'm not sure where Anderson was, if he just had to find his groove or whatnot, but there were a lot of guys that I was like, yo, where's their speed at? They looked really good in their heat races, right? I'm telling you, Anderson and Jett in the heat race was a really good battle for a minute, right? And then, of course, it, fizzled out. But it was a good battle, and that was like, ooh, Anderson's going to come and do some work in that main event. Unfortunately, didn't pan out that way. Anderson didn't do the best, in my opinion. He did great, but I expected a lot more from Anderson. Honestly, for Dylan Ferrandis surprised me more than Anderson did. Dylan Ferrandis was riding really well. You can tell that he's really comfortable on that Honda, and I can't wait to see how the season's going to how this season's going to continue to grow for Dylan Ferrandis as well. But let's not leave out Cooper Webb, guys. I am not the biggest Cooper Webb fan. I love that he always gives it up to the Lord whenever he's on the podium or he's on the box or they do an interview. I respect that about Cooper Webb. He is a race crafty guy. Cooper Webb was showing some mad speed, bro. He was showing some mad speed. And I was kind of getting pumped up. I was like, is Cooper Webb going to roll up? Is Cooper Webb going to catch Ken Roczen, who was riding Ken Roczen? Yo, K-Rock, the 94 on that Suzuki with the kickstart, was riding very well. It was exciting to see K-Rock, doing work out there too. There for a minute, I thought K-Rock was going to catch up to Chase Sexton because Ken Roczen was really, really running with good speed. But Cooper Webb, man, that guy, you could tell he was on a mission. He had some ground to cover. He was making some good passes. He came up through the pack. He looked really good at the end of the night. So the 450 race didn't have any crazy accidents, right? All night, the 450 heats and the 450 main. LCQs were a little interesting with Cade Clayson there when he went over the finish line jump after getting knocked by, Harrison, I think, maybe. Don't quote me. He knocked him, and then there goes Cade right over the handlebars, and it was kind of tough. That was a tough one for sure. But overall, man, 450 main event was pretty chill. I wanted to see Aaron Plessinger continue to push, but dude, when everybody's on in that 450 class, you better bring your best mentality, your best ride, and your best focus, because a lot of those guys were on point, and some of the ones who weren't still rode very well, right? I say Tomac dropping back to 11th was super duper surprising, but overall that 450 main event, watching Jett do what Jett does, watching Webb really wake up and come through the pack, watching Ken Roczen push and charge towards Chase Sexton for second place. He didn't make it. He made a couple bobbles and mistakes, so he didn't make it. But overall, Detroit was insane, man. It was honestly some really good racing that we got to appreciate in Detroit.